if you're listening and you are in the US, then yeah, of course, obviously you're being targeted for propaganda, right? Every time a YouTube ad plays with a political message, that's propaganda toward you. Every time, you know what? Every time an advertisement for a fast food franchise comes on, that's arguably propaganda. But for a long time, the idea was that the United States was above using state level militaristic propaganda on its own people domestically. That would turn out not to be the case. History is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. We've talked about propaganda in the past. It is a very real thing. It is quite effective. And it's one of those things that is so audience specific at times that it's almost like regional food, you know? Like if you grew up in an environment where there was no such thing as cheese, you would think cheese is gross. And, you know, you'd have a point. It's a weird process. It's a weird thing. It's just so tasty if you're familiar with it. And likewise with any other number of regional food stuff. So propaganda, by that comparison, can seem completely believable, rational, and fact-supported if you are the intended audience, right? If we can just say, oh, you're already sorted down with this. Well, let me get you a little more down. Pretty soon you're 10 toes down. And that's how the manipulation works. A lot of times in the West, this is portrayed as something that is beneath the good guys, right? It's beneath the Allied forces, aka the West and Five Eyes and all that slow jazz. But not really. Totally not really. Right? A lot of the same tactics that have been used by the Russian government or by the Chinese government, information control, and used by cults on lower levels. Uncle Sam has done the same things. And recently there was a Washington Post article by Ellen Nakashima that I want us to pay some particular attention to today. The Pentagon has opened up what it is calling a sweeping review of clandestine psyops, psychological operations. And this is due to a request from multiple other federal agencies, as well as the White House. And these agencies are complaining about the U.S. military's influence operations. I like that phrase. Influence operations, using Facebook and Twitter in particular. Now, we know that Twitter is riddled with bots. We know that Facebook turns a blind eye to active disinformation campaigns and propaganda. In both cases, it's because they're motivated by profit. They're not really, they're not really chasing some larger philosophical idea past Q3 or Q4. So the Pentagon said, all right, we need to get a hold of our online fake accounts, and we need to clean the skeletons from the closet of our clandestine information warfare. That's right. The Pentagon has been doing psyops for quite a long time. Last month, two internet research outfits, Graphica and the Stanford Internet Observatory. You like that? Observatory for the internet? I think it's clever. Yeah. They disclosed that there were more than 150 bogus personas and media sites that were active. Now, these researchers did not, this is important, they did not explicitly attribute these fake accounts to the U.S. military, but it's pretty obvious. You know what I mean? Like it's pretty obvious, right? It's like if you saw Frankenstein's monster loitering around the body of Victor Frankenstein and had blood on one of his, reanimated hands. And he was standing next to some, bloody graffiti that said, the creator has been uncreated. You know what I mean? You don't have proof yet, but you like him for it. Yeah, right.
I just walked up on this. It's like the sketch on I Think You Should Leave, where he's like wearing the hot dog costume.
Yeah.
And he's like, we got to find out who did this. Because it's a hot dog mobile that's crashed into this. Everyone's like terrified, and he comes sauntering up. We have to find out who did this.
The master stroke there is one of the guys who unfortunately is wearing a suit that has hot dog colors, like a suit and tie. That's one of the writers on I Think You Should Leave now. They do great work. Do check out that show if you have time, and if you work for CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, you may well not have time because people are about to start going through your stuff. This thing appears to have been triggered by an investigation running for several years, or diving into propagandistic bot and fake accounts and astroturf, whatever you want to call it, for quite a while. People went on record responding to this. Well, people in the U.S. government, the spokespeople for Facebook and Twitter, their lips are sealed. Mum's the word. The Air Force Brigadier General Patrick Ryder, who was the current Pentagon press secretary, said that these, again, information operations, quote, support our national security priorities, and that they're totally going to enforce these safeguards. It's not that he caught us. We were totally going to do this. And I think this opens up a question. We mentioned it on, I was talking with Jordan Harbinger. We're talking with the good folks at Macro Dosing, the way that the propaganda game has changed in the United States. If you're listening and you are in the U.S., then yeah, of course, obviously you're being targeted for propaganda, right? Every time a YouTube ad plays with a political message, that's propaganda toward you. Every time, every time an advertisement for a fast food franchise comes on, that's arguably propaganda. But for a long time, the idea was that the United States was above using state-level militaristic propaganda on its own people domestically. That would turn out not to be the case. Also, just for the record, COINTELPRO never ended. Just going to put that out there. Just have fun with that one. If you are listening
Yeah, no, it's perfect, man. It sounds familiar to the Russia spending $300 million thing, right? Well, on influencing elections and politics in other countries. Mm-hmm. It feels like a donut hole version of that, Kruller or whatever. What am I saying? I don't know.
No, you nailed it. And I love a good pastry reference, man. Thank you. And so there are things like our international listeners, you're doubtlessly familiar with this. There are things like the Voice of America, right? Which is stationed abroad and is pro-US, right? Enforces geopolitical, or tries to popularize geopolitical goals of the US and its owner corporations. There are places like Radio Free Europe, which does the same thing. And just to give us a sense of the kind of things they're saying, right? It's not as simple as North Korean propaganda. Like DPRK propaganda, if you go to the news site, is pretty Orwellian. It's pretty easy to see what the spin is. And you also know the provenance, right? You know the source. But for example, this again is due to the great work by the journalists at the Washington Post. You'll see examples of a fake account, right, purporting to be something it is not, posting tweets saying stuff like relatives of Afghan refugees who have died are reporting that their bodies are returning from Iran with their organs stolen. And this tweet links to an article, right? Especially if you're fake, you always want to say, oh, here, right? Here's my research. This tweet goes to an article that is based on a website that is low-key, totally an Uncle Sam site. And then we get to the business of contractors. Just like you were saying, Matt, it's brilliant, right? China does it. Russia does it. The 50-cent army, right? Or a bunch of like concerned Russian hackers. Guys, we can't control them. Their opinions are their own. They just happen to be our opinions because we are super correct. And so that's what's happening. U.S. outfits aren't commenting on who created these accounts. Is it someone in a skiff out in CENTCOM, or is it a contractor who's just working on their free time, right? So this is dangerous territory, and it's muddy water. And I just felt like as important as it was for us to point out the proof that Russia is messing under the hood of dozens and dozens of governments, it's also key to note that the United States is doing the same.